5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello everybody, it's Sylvie. I hope you're doing good. Welcome to another weekly-ish vlog. I don't know how long this is going to go on for. It depends how much reading I do or if I get up to anything interesting. So, it's New Year's Day, it's January the 1st. I hope 2023 is treating you well thus far. So far it's rained on me twice, which I don't know what that says about the year, but damp. Anyway, I'm here. We're together now, and I might as well tell you what I'm reading. So yesterday, as you will have seen if you watched the last vlog, I finished Queen of Nothing. I finished my 60th book of the year, and then when I was like, after that I wanted to read something else, so I picked up the Starless Sea, which I started 2 vlogs ago. Didn't know how I felt about it, wasn't really compelled to continue, so I didn't, but because it was already like on the go, I decided to pick this back up. And I still kind of don't know how I feel about it. There is one single thing in this book that I actually dislike, which is how there are so many like micro stories interwoven with the main plot, which is the point of the books. I'm not holding that up as like a flaw of the book, it's just a feature which I don't really gel with because I expect they're going to become either relevant or they're all going to tie together or something like that. But all they're doing at the moment is interrupting the main narrative, and I won't remember that many micro plot lines for when they all become relevant at the end. So it's just one of those things. It's just not a feature of the storytelling that I particularly like. But aside from that, there's nothing I dislike about this book. I like it, but there's also nothing that I like especially like. There's nothing that is really compelling to me. There is nothing that appeals to my personal specific tastes as a reader. So it's kind of, it's not a bland book, but it's just so not anything that massively appeals to me, but also there's nothing I dislike. I still don't have any feelings about this book. It's a really weird one, and I expect I will keep dipping in and out of it. But that leads me on to what hopefully will be my next read, which is this. This is A Prayer for the Crown Shy, a Monk and Robot book by Becky Chambers. This is a nice short book, so hopefully I'll get this read very quickly, get some momentum going on my 2023 reading, and I'm sure I will enjoy it because I love Becky Chambers and I thought this was like a really nice book to start the year on. So there's that. This is a sci-fi but in Becky Chambers style. It's a very like cozy, wholesome, like hope punk sci-fi in which a tea monk and a robot become friends. And because I haven't read it yet, that is all I have to say to you for right now. So that's about it. I should probably leave that here and not bore you anymore. I will catch up with you when I've read something and when I had something to say. My cat knocked over my tripod this morning when I let her in my room because she was screaming at me outside my door at 6 AM. Love that. And she knocked my tripod over, and I fear it may never be the same again, but it is holding up for the moment, so we're going to roll with it because what else am I supposed to do? It's Wednesday, the 4th of January. I have a reading update for you. Isn't that exciting? So I'll go right into it. I finished the Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the sequel to A Psalm for the Wild Built. This is a novella series by Becky Chambers, who does wholesome, cozy sci-fi. I think she's only written sci-fi. I love everything she writes. I loved this too. In case I didn't, even if I did tell you about this, I probably didn't give you a synopsis because I'm really bad at that. But this series of novellas is set on like a kind of utopian, it's not set on Earth, it's set on some moon in space somewhere, but it's kind of a post-capitalist utopia in a way. In the past on this moon, people had industry, they had robots gained sentience, robots left the humans because humans sucked, and then humanity had to kind of rebuild and now live in harmony with each other and with nature and all that jazz. In the first book, our main character Dex, who becomes a tea monk, which is somebody who just kind of roams around giving people tea and a shoulder to cry on kind of thing. He meets Moscap, who is a robot who has emerged from the wilderness. This is the first robot that anybody has heard from in a very long time. I want to say like hundreds of years. And Moscap is asking, what is it that people need? Which can be taken literally, it can be taken metaphorically, and this book is the pair of them kind of journeying through and Moscap asking its question. Sibling Dex is having a little bit of a existential crisis at the same time, which is not surprising because if I was traveling with somebody who kept asking, what is it that people need? I too would have an existential crisis. As with the first book in this series, I loved this. Like I say, I always love Becky Chambers books. They're always very like comforting and cozy and wholesome and give you a lot of hope for humanity in a way that sounds very grandiose and isn't actually quite what I mean, but they just make you remember that people are people are people and everybody is capable of big feelings and being nice. I feel like that's what these books are. Big feelings and people being nice. I won't say too much about this because it's very short and I feel like I did a not too terrible job summarising the series for possibly the first time in my life. But I very much enjoyed this. I would of course be continuing the series. I will say this felt, more than anything else I've read by Becky Chambers, this felt like an instalment in a series. And she's written the Wayfarers series, which was 4 books long, but that didn't have like a through line of plot throughout the 4 books. There were some recurring characters, but it wasn't like narratively a series, whereas this very much is, and this felt like an instalment. And it also didn't feel like it fully wrapped up in a way, which I think is perhaps kind of the point because it's this big like existential question. And it definitely had cycles of questions that were answered. But yeah, it definitely feels like an installment in a series, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm just realising that's the first time I've seen that from Becky Chambers. So that's my thoughts on that. So moving on, what else have I read? Well, I've continued some more with The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I'm now halfway through this and I still don't know what I think about this book. I will say they're like micro stories, micro plots within the plot, stories within the story thing is starting to get on my nerves, but only because at least in the last like 100 pages or so that I've read, they've been so frequent. Like we get a short chapter of the like primary plot and then we get like a short story and so on and so forth, which was really annoying me. I'm now at the point where some of the short stories are like referring back to earlier stories, so it feels less irritating. But yeah, I'm still reading it. I want to know what happens and I really love the writing, and what I can only gather is the Starless Sea itself, or the harbour of the Starless Sea itself, and that setting, this kind of magical, nothing quite makes sense setting. I really like that setting. I am enjoying being in that setting, and it reminds me of something that I must have read in another book, and I can't for the life of me think of what it reminds me of, but I love it. I'm obsessed. I want to be in that place for the whole of this book. I don't actually care about the plot. I genuinely don't think I care about the plot. I just want to be in the place. I think if you like short story collections, especially if you like sort of interconnected short story collections, this would be like absolutely right up your street, because that's almost what it feels like. There is, I'm calling it the main narrative. I'm treating it as the main narrative. That is most prominent. But I think if you like short story collections, you'd really like this, especially because a lot of these other stories that are interspersed with the main narrative, they feel like the author, Erin Morgenstern, had ideas for specific sort of scenes or places in this world that she's built, and she wanted to write them even though they don't technically serve the main plot. And that's what she did with this book. That's kind of what this book is. And that's not a criticism. I think it's just a very unique, or at least unique to the books that I've read before, style of telling a story. So the other thing that I am curious about in terms of the way this story is being told in this book is that our main character, Zachary, he is doing his PhD on video games and the way that you can tell a narrative within a video game, which is obviously partly self-directed by the player, depending on the game. But that's not really been mirrored in the way that this book is written, at least so far. So I'm curious to see if that's gonna maybe be the case a little bit more in the second half of the book, because honestly I kind of forget that that's what he's doing as his PhD, as his studies, until occasionally he'll make like a little bit of a reference as he's moving through the weird plot line of this story. And so I'm just curious as to why that was chosen, because I would think that if you've got a character who's studying the way stories are told through video games, that would be reflected more in the way that this story is told, because otherwise he could have done anything. He could have been an archaeologist. So yes, I have thoughts. I want to finish this book, because I mean I'm happy to be reading this book, but I want to know what I think about it at the end, which is weird because that's not really a way that I've felt about a book before. I usually want to know what happens in the book, whereas with this I'm really curious to just see how I'm going to feel about it by the time that I'm done, because this is unlike anything that I've ever read, at least in the way that it's structured and told, and is not something that really appeals to me just based on the way that it's structured, as I've said about a million times now. So I'm going to leave that there for now, and I will obviously let you know what I think when I've read some more. And then the third book that I have on the go is Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This is a young adult fantasy. At least I'm assuming it's a young adult fantasy because it reads like one. Our character is like 16 and it's priced like a young adult fantasy. Anyway, I decided to pick this up and read this because after reading the Folk of the Air trilogy, the Cruel Prince books, and loving them, I'm like, now is the time for me to be reading YA fantasy because I'm kind of excited to read it again. I don't know anything about this book, or I didn't when I picked it up, because I bought this for £1 in a charity shop because it's pretty. So I had no real like excitement to read this book particularly. I did buy it just because it was cheap and pretty, and I thought now's the time. Also, it's a hardback, and if I don't like it, I can get rid of it, and there can be a hardback spaced shape on my shelf. And then if I do like it, I can buy the second book, because this is a duology, while it's still in hardback, and they can match, because I have my priorities straight. Anyway, I'm about 60 pages in of this 450-ish page book, and this is a fantasy world. It's, I'm gonna say Asian inspired, and that is so vague because obviously Asia is very large, but I'm not sure specifically what it's inspired by. So I googled it because I thought it was stupid that I didn't know what this was inspired by. And apparently it is inspired by ancient China and Japan and the beginnings of the Silk Road. So there's that. It's an entirely fantasy world. Our main character is a princess. She is the only daughter of the emperor. And when we start this book, she is about to meet her betrothed because she's going to be sent off to marry someone for political alliance. And for reasons of her own, she jumps into a lake and is rescued by a dragon. There are dragons in this book. I didn't know that, because there's no dragons on the cover. There's cranes on the cover. So I'm thrilled that there's dragons, because if you know me, you know I love a dragon book. And then the thing I do know about this book is the story of the Six Crimson Cranes part is inspired by the fairy tale where the girl's brother gets turned into birds and she has to undergo a task to rescue them, or to like turn them back, and there's an evil stepmother kind of a character. So we've met various of those characters. and I'm really intrigued to see how that story is going to play out alongside the dragons and the kind of in-world mythology of where the dragons came from and where the magic in this world is, because where the princess lives, magic is bad and forbidden, because that's the other thing, she also has this forbidden magic. So there's actually quite a lot going on, and I'm only 60 pages in, but there's already quite a lot happened. It's very fast paced. I'm really enjoying this. And I'm pleasantly surprised so far that I'm really enjoying this, because like I say, I bought it kind of at random. So I will let you know more as more happens, but so far Princess has been learning some magic, making friends with the dragon, who's just had to go away for dragon reasons, and she is presumably going to be found out by her stepmother, is the only thing I can guess based off the fairy tale. Anyway, that's that. I do love this cover. She's just so pretty. So that's my reading update for you. I am about to film a video or two, hence the very like glitzy makeup. I'm hoping to film my 2023 goals video, which I filmed last week, and I felt weird, so I deleted the footage because I'm annoying. And then also a book haul, which should be really easy, and I've already got the books out, so hopefully I will film 2 videos this evening, and you may or may not have already seen them by the time this vlog goes up, because I don't know how long this vlog is going to run on for. Who knows? Not me. Anyways, I feel like I have more to say, but I don't know what that could possibly be, so I'm going to leave it there, and I'll catch you in the near future. Hey everybody, it's Friday. It's Friday. I've got a reading update for you. Quickly, I don't really have a reading update on Six Crimson Cranes because I've not read much more of this. I'm really annoyed because I really want to, but I've just not sat down with it because it's physical and it's big, and you know, it's just easier for me to read ebooks than audiobooks. I am on page 100. And in terms of the story, so I don't know what the story is called, but the fairy tale where the girls' brothers get turned into, I think it's swans, at least in the version of the tale that I know. Her brothers get turned into swans by her evil stepmother, because it's always a wicked stepmother, isn't it? And the equivalent of that has happened in this book. In this book, they've been turned into cranes. And the princess, what's her name? Shiori, has been effectively banished and silenced as per the original. Well, I say original fairy tale, it's probably one of those things that has a lot of origins, isn't it? But she has been silenced. She can't speak, or she can physically speak, but she has to not speak, or else it will kill her crane brothers. And she is just about to, I assume, figure out what the fuck she's gonna do and how to like fix what's gone on. So that's what that is. I'm enjoying this so far, but like I say, I've just not sat down to read it. I'm really hoping to do so this evening, I think, because I want to know what happens. I also realised after I spoke to you last, there's a whole book that I've read that I have not told you about. So I listened to the audiobook for Bloody Summer by Carmen Machado, which is a short story. It's one of the like Amazon Prime originals. They release collections of short stories every so often, and this was one of those. I say short story, I think technically speaking it's too long to be a short story, but I'm not sure what the like official limit is for that. But it was very short. It was about half-hour listen on audio. I have read her short story collection, Her Body and Other Parties. I've recommended that I think several times, if not on this channel, at least like in like conversation with actual people. I really like that short story collection. It's a lot of like weirdness, fairy tale vibes, horror vibes. And I'm not the biggest fan of short story collections. That format doesn't really do it for me, but I really liked her short story collection because she plays around with the format of the story quite a lot, which is also what she did in this short story. So this was told as though it was like a research paper. In this fictional academic paper, the author of this paper was studying a brief period of time in some town in America where there was a lot of like whatever the like a localized folk tale is, or like a localized urban legend about tigers, as well as children's like rhymes, and it's kind of surreal and creepy, and I won't say anything more than that because it was such a short read, but I really liked the format. I thought that was a really interesting way of telling a short story, and I think it really worked because the short story format just doesn't super work for me. I always want to know more, especially about like the world building stuff, which tends to be what gets left out of a short story for obvious reasons. But framing it as an academic paper, I thought just worked really well because you don't expect loads of background and additional info in an academic paper. So I really enjoyed that. I also started another book. I started another audiobook, and I'm listening to Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Sutanto. I wanted something fun and lighthearted to listen to. This is fitting the bill nicely. So we're following Medi, who is Indo-Chinese American, and she lives with her mum and very close to her other 3 aunts, and they run a wedding business all together. Her mum sets her up on a blind date the day before the biggest wedding that they've ever done. She accidentally kills her blind date, and then it kind of ensues from there. There's lots of like drama and hijinks, and it's quite high stakes, but it's not written as like a very like tense, gritty kind of a story. This is as close to a thriller as you're going to find me getting, because it is also a rom-com. So although it's quite stressful, it's also quite light-hearted, and it's interspersed with like the romance storyline that she's also having. So I think it's quite a fun read because you've like got this what could easily be like a thriller, not really a thriller because the guy's already dead and we know who did it, but like a tense murder cover-up kind of story, but also this rom-com that's also happening, as well as just like general family chaos because she's got her mum and 3 aunts, and they all have like kind of a competitive rivalry-ness, and I'm really loving this. I will say that the relationship with her mum and her aunts, who kind of function as like additional parents, I really like how that relationship or relationships are portrayed. So that is that book. I am also further along with The Starless Sea. I'm over halfway through now. I think I'm approaching like 300 pages. I'm not sure. The book in question. Yeah, so I'm about over halfway through, and everything that I've said previously about this book still stands, but I think now I'm over halfway through and all of the like additional stories are starting to tie together a little bit more. I'm finding that less frustrating to read than I was earlier on in the book, where I felt like they were interrupting. The thing that was like a big threat and quite like tense and stressful that happened within like the first 40% of the book, that almost has just been like not forgotten about exactly, but it just isn't being treated as though it's like particularly important or urgent is the word really by the characters. So while they're waiting for something to happen, I guess, Zachary is almost on a side quest of sorts, unraveling not like the mystery of the Starless Sea and this weird world, because I think there's more than one mystery, but unraveling one of the mysteries, maybe being presented with an additional mystery. I'm not quite sure, but I am really enjoying this. Like, I am happily reading this at this point. So it was a weird one. Like, it was not even slow to get into because I was interested the whole time. I just wasn't really sure why I cared, almost. I don't know. It's been a weird one, but I am enjoying it, and I am happy to continue. That, I think, is all the update I've got to give you, reading wise. I can't string coherent thoughts together, let alone a sentence. Oh, I have some books though to show off. Let's do that. So my order for The Stolen Heir came in. I think it was in my last vlog that I talked about this. So I read the Cruel Prince Folk of the Air trilogy in the last like week or so of December. vlogged it, and then once I was finished I realised that this was a thing. This came out on like Tuesday, this came in the post yesterday, and I'm very excited to read it. So this is following like 8 years or so in the future after the ending of The Queen of Nothing, and is following Jude's younger brother, Oak, who is Fae himself, is technically heir to the throne of Fairy, but is no longer in any real danger of being forced onto the throne, at least where we left it at the end of the trilogy. So I'm going to get through the stuff that I'm currently reading and then hopefully pick this up really soon, because I enjoyed my rereads so much that I just want to like stay in this world. I also have a bonus Christmas present. So this is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This was from my brother. He ordered it in time for Christmas, but it arrived like damaged. The box had been like rained on or was soaking wet or something, so the book was wrecked, so he returned it. Got me a fresh nice new one, so I'm thrilled about this. So this is by T. Kingfisher, and I read, was it called The Hollow Places? Did I make that up? I read it not that long ago. I read it in like October, or yeah, October. Wow. Anyway, I really enjoyed that. That was my first T. Kingfisher, and this is similar, like horror kind of vibes. I actually don't know what this is about. So this is a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's classic The Fall of the House of Usher. I've never read any Poe. I don't know even what his stories are. So there's a retired soldier. They find out their friend is dying. They race to go and see them and find a nightmare of fungal growths and possessed wildlife. That sounds great. I could probably guess that from the cover, but I love me a mushroom, I guess. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to go and do other things, hopefully do some reading, change out of this jumper, which I'm realising is a hideous colour on me. and yeah, I will catch you later. How have I been talking for 17 minutes? I actually don't know what I've said. It's like I've blacked out. I don't know what I've said. This is going to be really horrible to edit. I'm so unbelievably tired that just nothing is, nothing, the synapses are not firing. Do synapses fire? Do neurons fire? Do I have any of those? I'm not sure. Hello everybody, it is now Monday, it's now next week, so I'm going to wrap up this reading vlog. I have quite a lot to say. I read loads over the weekend and haven't updated in days, so I don't remember where I was with Dial A for Aunties when I last spoke to you. I think I was still reading it. If I end up repeating myself, I guess I'll just cut out this portion, but I have finished this book. Yeah, I listened to the audiobook for this, I really enjoyed it. It was a fun time. I needed something that was like, not a fantasy, that was contemporary, so I didn't have to like visualise too much, which I always find harder with audiobooks than with like reading with my eyes, so that's why I picked up this via audio. And this was a fun time. It was slightly ridiculous, that was the point, because it's like a rom-com with a murder, so they can't go too like realistic with the dead body stuff and the repercussions from that, or it would like kill the whole rom-com vibe. So it was like slightly absurd, slightly ridiculous, but it was really fun. Equally, it was kind of cheesy, especially the rom-com stuff like was quite cheesy, perhaps a little bit too cheesy for my taste, but it definitely worked within the story of this book. I really enjoyed the main character, whose name I've forgotten, Medi, and her relationship with her mum and her aunts especially. I'm pretty sure I've said that already, but like I really liked that up through to the end of the book. And like the romance was cute. It was very cute. And also I really like the wedding setting, because they're all wedding vendors. And so most of this book takes place at this very like expensive, luxurious wedding. That's probably all I've got to say about this. It's fairly obvious what's going to happen because of the like tone of the book, and you know it's a romance, so There's not too much more to say, but I did enjoy this. When I last spoke to you, I'd read about 100 pages of this. I finished this in 1 or 2 sittings on Saturday. I read the remaining 350 pages so fast. I didn't want to put it down. I was having such a good time with this book. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this. Not because I expected to like actively dislike it, or I would have got rid of it already, but I don't know, I think because, like I've said several times, I felt like I'm kind of aging out of the young adult bracket, I guess. I suppose technically I am out of the young adult bracket, I'm 28, but in terms of like my reading taste, I just felt like I was aging out of enjoying young adult fantasy. And this book, at least, proved me wrong, as have several books recently. I'm on a real young adult book kick. Back to the point, I really enjoyed this. It is a retelling of the, I'm not sure what the like original fairy tale is called. I think it's a Hans Christian Andersen one. I could be wrong. And it's something to do with swans. The only other version of that story that I've read in a book is the Juliette Marillier one, which I didn't especially enjoy. Totally unrelated reasons, but this I really loved. I think one of the things that I especially loved about this is it's not just the fairy tale. Obviously you've got elements of the Chinese and Japanese like history and like folklore that goes into the setting, but also there's this like wider fantasy world. It doesn't feel like it's just a fairy tale retelling. It feels like it's a fairy tale retelling within the wider world. Like there's just more stuff going on. Like there's the kind of evil stepmother trope, but then the way that that relationship is explored I really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed where that went. There were actually several sort of like twists and turns, makes it sound much more like mysterious than it was, but just several ways the plot went that I didn't expect going into this book, knowing that it was this fairy tale retelling. It was more than I expected, basically, is what I'm trying to say, and I really loved it. I am almost annoyed at how much I loved it because now I want the sequel, so I've taken this book off my TBR, but I'm gonna like fill its place right back up by buying the sequel at some point, hopefully soon, and reading it, because the fairy tale that this is retelling is like wrapped up within this book, but then there's more going on. There's more in like the wider fantasy world happening, and the like dragon stuff is going to be more prevalent in the second book, I think. And I just want to know where her story goes. I feel like some of it's reasonably predictable, but that's not a bad thing. And especially I think something I can't fault the book for when I'm not the target audience. And I mentioned a vlog or two ago that I think YA books should be a little bit more tropey and a little bit more predictable. So that's certainly not something I'm criticising the book for. And I actually quite enjoy when I know where a book's going, because then I know sort of what to expect and I can enjoy the story actually happening. Whereas if I have to think too hard about what's going on in a story, that kind of kills the enjoyment for me. Which takes me on to the Starless Sea, which I have also finished, and I don't know what I think about this book. I don't know if I liked it or not. I know at points I really liked it. I think when I last spoke to you, I was at a point where I really liked it. I was maybe a little bit over halfway through. I didn't dislike it. The experience of reading this book, I did not dislike. I really liked the world and the like weird magic stuff going on and the setting. I really liked that. But I think that the way this story is told is what I didn't like about the book, because I liked everything else. I'm just confused. But I am also confused about the story, I guess. Although in terms of like, if you, like, I'm thinking about the like plot of this book and the like, the what happened with who and where and when, and that all makes sense. But whatever its like broader themes and like message is supposed to be is what's confused me. This is one of those books that's being really super clever by like feeding you bits of plot in different stories, and then it turns out they're all connected and they're all the same story, but they're not all the same story. And then the story finishes by being like, ah, but an ending is just a beginning. And like, it's being really smart, and I'm like, okay, but I don't know what the point is. Essentially, that sounds really harsh. I don't know what the point of this book was. That's ultimately, I think, my problem with it. And like, I just don't do well with anything that's all in the like subtext and all in the metaphor and all in what's being left unsaid, and that you have to kind of like put together yourself by looking at the gaps. Like, that's just not something I'm good at in any aspect of life. And so like, I find it frustrating to read because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing when I'm reading, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So this was just a weird reading experience. but I did like it, but I also was frustrated by it. I kind of want to reread The Night Circus and see how I feel about that, because I think the writing style on like a stylistic level is quite similar in terms of like the descriptions and the kind of world that she's created. From what I remember, what is reality, what's real, what's not, what's magic, what's not, like what's just in this like bubble reality that's been created for the book, like that kind of thing. And I don't dislike that. I quite like that. Am I glad I read this? I'm glad it's not my TBR anymore. I don't know. And with that, that's my reading week all wrapped up. Yeah, I read 5 things last week, which is astonishing. One of them was a short story, and several of them were like quite short, but I feel like it's quite impressive. But that is definitely not momentum that I'm going to be able to keep up throughout the year, because that would be incredible but unrealistic. That would be like 250 books, and that's simply not feasible. But it would be 260 because my maths is wrong. That's where I am with my reading, and mostly I'm just confused. Honestly, that's gonna keep me confused for a while. It's gonna be buzzing around my brain, which is not a bee pun but could be. And yeah, I'm annoyed that I don't know what to do with that book. Like, I read it and I'm like, well, now what? It's not even one that keeps you thinking in like a philosophical, existential way, or if it's supposed to be doing that, I'm not reacting correctly to it. But like, I'm just confused. Like, I don't know what the point was. I feel like Erin Morgenstern just wanted to like create this world and like indulge herself in it, and so she wrote this book. Like that, I think that's what this book was. And there's nothing like inherently wrong with that. And it wasn't a bad reading experience. I thought the writing was really great. I just it, if anybody has read this book, tell me what you thought. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm interpreting it wrong. And I know like there's no correct way to interpret or whatever, but like there's definitely a wrong way. And I feel like I'm interpreting this book wrong. So that is my reading week wrapped up. I'm gonna leave this here because I feel like that was a really rambly one. And also I could just keep rambling about how I don't understand the Starless Sea. So we're gonna stop. I'm gonna not put you through that for any longer. So I hope you've enjoyed this reading vlog. Thank you for sticking with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.